Hello, my name is Luna Eclipse and welcome to the Magical Rosary with Santa Muerte Facebook group. And let me just get into the frame here. For some reason my computer wasn't working and it wouldn't let me go live. So I'm doing this from my phone, which gives a more narrow view. But that is one of my Santa Muerte altars in one of my rooms of my house. So welcome to the Facebook Live video. I finally got it to work. This video will go about half an hour or so, and then I'll take some questions at the end from whoever would like to. And if you experience any trouble hearing me or anything like that, just let me know, and I can hopefully see what you type, and I can speak up or move my phone around. Usually I do this with my my computer, and for some reason it just wouldn't let me go live on there. So anyway, before we get into the bulk of everything, I would like to introduce myself just a little bit, so you know who is working with you here. I'm a second degree initiate of the OTO. I am a Wiccan priestess as well, specializing in Norse magic, and I do hold an Associates of Ministry, and at the end of this year, I will have completed my degree program and hold a bachelor's in ministry. So I'm a leader on the board of my city's Pagan Pride and Pagan Coalition. And let me just make sure that everything is working here okay. Oh, good, it is. So yeah, I'm on the board of my state's Pagan Leaders Association as well, and I'm a founder of the Metaphysical Market community that's from the West Coast. So I'm a devotee and priestess of Santa Muerte. I've been working with her for many years now, and I've been dedicated to her going on 3 years at this point. So, I was introduced to Santa Muerte by a brujo friend and roommate many years ago, whom you're going to meet eventually, and I've likewise studied under a curandera. So I approach Santa Muerte and her traditional ways with deference and respect for native voices and practices, and that's very important in everything that we do with Santa Muerte. So I have been developing and teaching the content that this group is kind of based around for free online and locally also for a year, about a year and a half now actually. And by the end of this year, the entirety of my content will be moved to a paid online platform, and the free weekly classes will come to an end, but they do still exist right now. You can find these classes on Second Life if you're interested. I did make a post about that, and I'll make it again probably around Sunday. They're every Monday on Second Life. And if you are interested in that. However, I will also still post some really wonderful content in this group from time to time as well. So what I teach in my rosary classes is twofold. I teach many different kinds of prayer beads and how to incorporate that magic into your practice. And the other half is completely dedicated to Santa Muerte and working with her traditional native practices exclusively on the rosary. So I do teach the traditional ways to work with and connect to Santa Muerte in these classes, including her origins and history, which we'll talk about a bit in a moment. As this is all very important to working and connecting with any being in an authentic way. You want to know their roots and their history and who they are. It's like any other relationship in your life. It can only be fostered through learning about the person and building a relationship through continual effort. I also teach some ways of blending Santa Muerte into practices and rituals that are already well known in occult, Western occult practices. It's important, though, to differentiate between the two. Santa Muerte is a lot like Madonna, I like to say. She's ever changing and ever evolving, and she often shows herself as we need her to be in the moment for us, but she never becomes something completely new. She's always Santa Muerte. She's always herself, and her roots are unchanging. The bulk of my practices with Santa Muerte come from her native traditions and are her native ways. She does enjoy trying on new outfits from time to time of magical practice, and she enjoys working with other kinds of magic that aren't traditional to her. Things that her devotees enjoy, so long as it's not in conflict or doesn't take away the energy from working with her in her native ways. It's really important to understand that. So by allowing her into your established personal practice while simultaneously learning about her native ways and practicing them as well, you both honor her and you show devotion. So feel free to develop a personal practice with Santa Muerte as what works for you and your relationship with her, but in no way should this conflict with the root of who she is, and in no way should this come at the expense of working with her traditional magic. Those are actually very important things to understand. So all of that is extra, working with her in the way that is not traditional to her, but is more in alignment with your traditional practices. All of that's extra. It's more like icing on the cake. And it's a really fun way to grow your personal practice with her and grow your relationship with her. But in this group, I just want to make sure that we're clear, that we'll be very careful of imposing our own will or our own ideas upon her or the native practices, as that would be the definition of cultural appropriation. So we're trying to be very mindful of that while still expanding and growing our practice with her as is fit for what we need to do with our own magic. So keep in mind, this group is not ever here to beat anyone with a ruler. Sometimes we just naturally will mess that up accidentally. This group is only here to teach you her ways. So it is very easy for us to come from what we know to understand that which we don't understand. And in Santa Muerte magic, there are many concepts that our Western society or even occult sciences just do not have words or concepts for, that native Mexican practices do understand in different ways than us. So these concepts between the two are not synonymous, and it's just important to understand that. We must try to suspend our own understanding of basic concepts to truly grasp how deep the mysteries of Santa Muerte go, and to truly harness her power. So beware of cultural appropriation, even if it's merely subconscious or based off of your misunderstanding of her. Santa Muerte will work with you to remedy any of these things, and you will probably mess this up at some point. Okay, we're not going to beat you around about it. This group is all about learning. So simply learn from the experience of that and transcend it. Transcend what you think that you knew or you thought that you knew a certain way, so you can develop a deeper relationship with her, and she will absolutely love you and bless you for doing so. So Santa Muerte is the force behind the rosary practices that I teach. Even when we do a different style of rosary practice, or even a different type of prayer necklace, prayer beads, or even to different deities, because there are some that I do to different deities as well. Santa Muerte is still involved in that. So over half the content that I've developed for this is for Santa Muerte and for her native practices. So she will always be present when we pray her rosary here, or even any other rosaries. But you don't have to work with Santa Muerte to enjoy this group. You will still get a lot out of this group, so don't worry about that. But it will be helpful though if you're comfortable with her. So this is her show, this is her channel, this is her group. Even if she has other deities that are guest presenters in a sense, or doing workings of other kinds from time to time. So it's more like she sponsors it. So happy Trickster Day to everyone. It is, my cat's name is Loki. He may be joining us at some point because sometimes he gets involved in whatever I'm doing over here and meows and wants to jump on my lap. I like to joke that it's his day. But it is Trickster Day. It's April 1st. So today is the day of tricksters and chaos. And although Santa Muerte is definitely not a trickster entity, she actually does exist within a structure or code that is all her own. That code can be shrouded in mystery for humans. It can be confusing to us because it's not the same thing as our personal codes, or codes of what we think we understand again, that we're accustomed to. So today we're going to start by getting to know Santa Muerte a little more. So most people in this group actually are pretty familiar with her, which is great. But I just want to make sure everyone here understands who she is and how to look at them. Hello, everyone. Thank you for shouting out. And if I accidentally miss anything that you're saying, like I said, I'll take some questions at the end. So I apologize. There's always a lot going on when you do the different videos, but I'll try to see if I can keep up on what people are saying. So Santa Muerte, we're going to look a little more, get to know Santa Muerte a little bit better by looking at the perceived chaos of Santa Muerte, or what we as humans might think is chaotic about her. So Santa Muerte is death itself. She is the embodiment of death and all of the elements that surround death. So while death can be chaotic from the perspective of human beings, mostly because we are socialized to fear it or to fear her, it follows a pretty reasonably structured code and framework. So she's a being of karma, and I put that in air quotes because I'm using a woo term to help you understand what I mean here. It can be hard for humans to understand what that means, as our view and perception of what we think the laws of karma are very human-centered. She's more justice, as it were, more the great equalizer, which I'll talk about in a minute. Hers is structured around the primal nature of death and life itself. It doesn't follow human laws or human rules. It's a pure understanding, a raw understanding of the laws of this life that humans cannot comprehend at more than a surface level. So in this nature, she can feel a bit trickster-like to us. Some people may be confused by her. Some people are afraid of her. And some are actually terrified of her. But her magic is extremely stable and grounded and centered in life and death, the cycles of such. And her power runs primally deep to the depths and roots of life itself. So she is the dark half of life. She is death. She is the force which granted us life, although she was not the force that literally created us. So she can be hard to gauge at times. Her energy can register a varied range of emotions as well. She can go really deep, and when you connect to her, you can feel her range of emotions, her energy and power, primal energy, all of this at the same time. And it can be a little overwhelming if you aren't used to that. And mastery of her deep magic is a lifelong feat, something that you could study forever and not truly get to all of the mysteries of until she comes for us. So yeah, although to humans her ways and her energy may feel chaotic, that is largely due to the barriers that we ourselves have erected within ourselves, within our own constructs and concepts, and within our own ways of thinking. So she exists within her own clear-cut laws and ways of working magic, and whether we realize it or not, we exist naturally within these laws. They just may not be apparent until the time of our death, the time of our reaping, unless we learn to work with her. So our cultures, and even many pantheons and gods, as we would know them in the modern era anyway, have laws that seem to exist outside the boundaries of the laws of death. They don't really. We just think that they do, or they've lost their connection. I know a lot of the Norse deities, and the Norse structure itself was a little more based on this concept of life and death. A lot of that has been watered down into today's modern concepts, so that's something to think about. Her very cult also contains a bit of chaos within it, mixing and blending various forms of magic to develop her own unique system. Santa Muerte is actually a full magical system in and of herself. You don't need to work with anyone else if you don't want to. You can, but you don't have to. She is sufficient in and of herself. She's a full, what you might consider a full pantheon in and of herself, in a sense, in her different colors and combinations, so her different facets. Her physical expressions of magical work stem from her Aztec and native Nahuatl and Magickal origins, from Mexican traditional witchcraft or brujeria, native healing and magical systems of curanderismo, European grimoire traditions, Catholicism, African diasporic traditions, political class activism even, and more recently there's been an influx of hoodoo, modern paganism, Wicca, voodoo, chaos magic even, and straight woo that sort of has gotten a little bit blended with her, but again, just be cautious of doing that yourself. If she wants to accept some of these things into her cult, she will. We should not be the ones to determine what gets accepted into her cult or not. So again, just be cautious. But she's ever changing. So different facets of her essence are found in many works, in many pop culture works, I should say. Some of my favorite pop culture references are Death in the Sandman. I love the Sandman comics, and I love Death in Sandman comics. That is one facet of who she is. It is only a small facet of who she is. Same thing with a lot of things, different versions of Death that are found as characters in anime. Also really neat to explore and to look at that, but it is just one facet of the vastness of who she is. So this eclectic nature that she has risen from underground into literally gives rise to an ever-evolving cult. Her religion, cult, I'm talking more in like a following, not something negative. More the ancient version of what you would think of as a cult, following a group of practitioners. So her cult or religion is the fastest growing and most evolving one in the world, which is exciting, and it's an exciting time to be a practitioner. Her cult is one which allows some wiggle room for assimilation to the practitioner, like I said previously, meaning her mysteries and magic are very personal, just as much as they are also cultural and steeped in the deep and rich culture of Mexico. And she does, to some extent, structure her magic to the personal practices of the individual that she works with. She wants us to be comfortable with her, and she does enjoy working our own personal magic with us. But make no mistake, she will also expect you to learn her cultural and native ways the right way. She will definitely make you learn her ways her way. So although Santa Muerte is more flexible with how she will work with you than many other entities, it is very important to learn how she has existed traditionally, the methods of magic associated with her, and to respect her connection to traditional Mexican native craft, spanning many centuries back to the Aztecs and even beyond. So Santa Muerte is and always will be aligned with this native Mishka energy. So be careful to learn her traditional and cultural ways. And if you have any questions, that's what we're here for. We have many people here who can help you to understand a lot of those basic concepts, to understand her roots. And we'll even be doing an interview in a little while with someone who's going to go into some of that, which is exciting. So yeah, learn her traditional culture, her cultural ways, her history, and respect the roots that she comes from, or you may very well learn the true nature of chaos. So there is an interesting practice. I'm focusing a little bit today to teach you a little bit about Intro to Santa Muerte by focusing on some interesting chaotic elements of her practices and things like that. And for me, there's an interesting one in her past practice that people had done in the 1700s or so of Mexican Pago Catholic probationers, and I'll put that in quotes too, because like I said, the more traditional native ways and practices were assimilated into Catholicism. So it was a blend of the two, enough to make sure that they could survive, but enough that they could still practice the old ways. So these probationers were leading an effigy of a skeletal bride through the streets, beating it and demanding favors from the spirit. This is a unique and chaotic and fascinating practice that still continues today with some practitioners of Santa Muerte, depending on what you choose to do with Santa Muerte. Although in most practices with her, this does seem to have gone out of style a bit. So when she's petitioned and does not produce quick enough results for the practitioner's satisfaction, they might punish her again, by turning her candles or effigies around to face the wall. They might refuse to give sacrifices until she performs what they desire. They might also cover her effigy on an altar with a cloth until she produces the results that they desire. While it's said that this practice does end up producing results, as a seer, I'm a tarot reader, and I've done lots of different in Norse tradition, you would call it workings of the web and the weird and things like that. As a seer, I don't necessarily believe that we as impatient humans always know what's best for us, or that we can see into the future properly often enough, unless we really know what we're doing, and even then, to know what's currently being woven for us in the fabric of what's going to be happening on the physical plane. So for me, I prefer co-creation to forced magic. That the forced magic may or may not work the way that we think it will, and it might only produce immediate but possibly short-lived results. So just bear that in mind. I personally find it disrespectful in my practice to Santa Muerte, who for me has been genuinely helpful, loving, and kind. But I'm also not culturally part of those who practice that style of Santa Muerte magic, that method. So it's not for me to judge. If that is what you do with Santa Muerte, and that's part of the culture that you've learned her magic from, then that may work very well for you. And that's kind of the how we look at Santa Muerte magic. Some things may or may not work for you, but it's important to understand the practices and where they come from, so we don't judge them as well, and so we can understand what those practices might mean for the practitioner. So, how you work with Santa Muerte is only between her and the practitioner. Which leads me to yet another aspect of hers that comes across potentially chaotic to those who do not know her yet, know her well yet. So Santa Muerte does not judge anyone. She loves and accepts all equally as her children. She helps enable us to live our best lives so she can grant us a good death, hopefully when it is our time. This can look chaotic to humans who judge. We like to judge ourselves, and we like to judge others too, whether we realize that or whether it's subconscious. We may think that some people are not worthy, or that we ourselves are not worthy of happiness or success. And sometimes we only think that subconsciously, but we still think it. Santa Muerte wants a good life for all of her children, no matter who they are, no matter what they have done. So she will never turn anyone away, and she will be the one to greet us in her arms upon our death. Death is, in this case, love itself. She will help anyone who seeks her, but she will not help you to unduly harm or force human judgment or revenge upon others without it coming at great cost to you. She is what you could call, again in air quotes, karmic justice, not judgment. She is the great equalizer. That is who she is. She will sometimes use trickster energy, though, to teach you or to lead you down the path that's best for you. She will give you the rope that you desire, that you've been asking for, that will enable you to either succeed or to hang yourself, depending on your choices with what you choose to do with it. Either way, the choices will eventually lead you back into her loving embrace anyway. And as such, she is the great teacher. She is the great mother. She is death. She is the one that will embrace us when our time is here. So we ourselves, to her, are pretty chaotic creatures. To her, humans are pretty chaotic because we also don't follow the laws of life and death itself. We try to create our own concepts of karma, our own concepts of these laws. So bottom line, she's non-judgmental, and she will want to teach you to be free from judgments yourself. Because we don't understand this concept naturally. It can feel a bit chaotic to us until we see it and feel it in action. And the best way to do that is to start working with her. There is, however, a possibility for one not to have a good death. This is more rare, and this was something that took me years to figure out, to see for myself. This makes death herself cry and mourn. The concept of life potential the concept of a life potential needlessly wasted creates a deep pain within Santa Muerte, as it is a pain that she who has known only death, she who has had this potential herself taken away, she knows this intimately. After witnessing the aftermath of a live shooter a few years ago, I was brought to tears by the confused, emotional, and upset spirits the grief-stricken mourning of Santa Muerte herself. She was crying for them, and she showed me in that moment that sometimes she is forced to give someone a death that is not a good death, the good death that she would like to give to us all. humans are, again, chaotic creatures. And although she will always welcome us back to her arms, when these unfortunate humans are reaped early, they are not ready yet to cross over. So it will take them a little bit of time before they can return to her embrace. And that's not her decision. That's our decision, or the energy of the souls that needs to heal something before they can move on to her loving embrace. And this always makes her cry. This always makes her very sad. So for me, when I saw that, it was a bone-chilling sight. And the victims of that shooting did eventually find their way to her arms, but it did take a little bit of time. And only after community involvement and us healing, sending lots of healing vigils and lots of healing out to the spirits and to their families. So as someone who has, I've over a decade worked with spirits for a living, worked as a reader and all of these things, a healer, this was one of the more intense experiences that I've ever witnessed with her and the dead. So keep in mind, the time upon this earth is, that the time that we have spent upon this earth is not the indicator of what a good life and good death is. There are many things that can determine that. So things like how full your life was, how much love you accumulated in your life, how you reside in the hearts of those that have that you have left behind. So a child that lives only for a day could have a better life and better death than someone who has lived almost a century. And as humans, that's hard for us to grasp. But when you cross over, that's something that you'll be able to understand. One of her or if you've worked with her for a long time, then you probably already know this as well. So Santa Muerte's origins are essentially as the first, there's a few different myths regarding this, but essentially she was the first child who died before being able to taste the nectar of life. A child of possibility whose possibility was ended before she had the opportunity to taste life. And sometimes you'll see her as the bride as well, because that's one of the major things, that many women would have looked forward to, being able to cross that. And that was something she had looked forward to and was not able to experience herself. So you'll see her as the bride, and that's basically echoing the exact same idea as what I just said. So her mythos is that she was the first human baby to die or to be sacrificed, and thus she claimed through her own divine right, the power of the queen of the underworld, or Mictlan. Mictlan is the Aztec underworld. So she was alone in the darkness, and she searched within herself for the power needed to claim this. In this way, you may feel compelled, if you're studying more from a Western occult perspective, to associate with her or equate her with Persephone, but make no mistake, the two are very different. I've seen people compare her to Azrael, and again, the two are very different. Santa Muerte is not an angel, she is death itself. Azrael would be more of her hand. She'd be like, hey, errand boy, kind of. And so in that case, she is not just death itself, but all things pertaining to death fall under her realm. She is all of it. So yeah, she does not directly translate to any Western understanding of or stereotype or archetype. So we must be careful of not mislabeling her due to cultural appropriation. The only way to learn more about who she truly is to release our own view of the concepts that we have learned and that we think we understand, and we do to some point, to a Western perspective, and instead release those and experience her and her mysteries outside of our own current understanding. In doing so, we will attain a separate but overarching understanding of her mysteries, of death, and even of life itself. And that can be very powerful. So her modern incarnation and even her name is a bit of an evolution from her past. Originally, she was the Aztec goddess of death, Mictlantecuhtli. She ruled the underworld and the underrealms of Mictlan, which again was like the Aztec underworld, with her husband Mictlantecuhtli. So she was responsible for watching over the bones of the past sons. And I do have a really cool I think it's a TED Ed video that I discovered a few months back about how that happened, how the different sons came about. It doesn't directly talk about Santa Muerte, but I'll post it because it's fun. But yeah, she was the one who would watch over the bones. So yeah, there had been 4 incarnations of humans or human-like beings in the past eons, and they had been marked by 4 separate sons or eras. And when the gods came to her to establish and begin the 5th son, the final son, she didn't want to give up the bones. She didn't want to let us go. She didn't want us to suffer. She wanted to maintain her connection to us. So in some accounts, she was tricked by a god into trying to steal the bones. And in doing so, in stealing the bones, he tripped and he fell, and the bones of all of the eons past broke and mixed together. And this is why we have humans of varying shapes and sizes and colors. In any case, though, the agreement that they reached was that Magickal would watch over the living, as she also watches over the bones of the dead, as our mother. And in death, she would be the one to reap us and return us to her bosom and loving embrace when we return to her realms of Mictlan. So in this way, she is actually like a mother who cares deeply for us and loves us. But she is also not beyond kicking us a bit in the rear end when we need it. She does not mind the tough love if we really need it. So she simply loves us deeply, and she wants us to live our lives to the fullest in the best way that we can. Because of this, she is perfect for working different kinds of shadow work. If you do any of that, she's wonderful for working with some of this and reclaiming anything that has put you into the underworld in this life, in a more figurative way of speaking. She wants us to reclaim our power in this life so that we can truly live. She is our mother who could never truly birth us, as she is death, not life. And we are forever her children. We will eventually return to her loving embrace when it is our time. So her counterpart in Aztec mythology was Tonantzin, the earth goddess, the one who created life. Mictlan allowed the bones to be brought back to life, but it was her counterpart, or sometimes referred to as her sister, Tonantzin, who was given the power to birth the bones back to life. This mythology is a little bit shrouded in mystery because you'll hear certain things being tossed back and forth, and I don't think it's literal, but it's also figurative. But yeah, this relationship has been equated to that of sisters, and it's also a bit like 2 sides of the same coin. So it's a deeper secret of Santa Muerte, but as the Aztec people were conquered by the Spanish Catholic conquistadors, the gods and goddesses were assimilated by the Magickal or Nahual indigenous people into Catholicism. Through different, of course, this was through methods of forceful integration to Catholic and European ways, but they were, at least in that, by doing it that way, they were able to maintain roots back to the traditions. And you can still see that today. The Catholic saints and deities, or even pantheon, for lack of a better term, they were merged with the Aztec gods. So Tonantzin then became Mary, or Our Lady of Guadalupe. And you can still see Tonantzin's sacred imagery even today in depictions of Our Lady with the green cloak. And she was even seen first on the same sacred hill as was for Tonantzin. So, and Mictlan then became Santa Muerte, who then became an underground and disavowed Catholic folk saint, which she remains even today. So even though she's emerging from the shadows at a time when humanity really needs her most, she's still seen as a heretical figure by the Catholic Church. And if you go and talk to any Mexican people, or even people in Mexico, they may not know who she is, or they may pretend that they don't know who she is. So just keep that in mind. A lot of people will still try to disavow her, and some people, even from Mexico, don't want to work with her because they see her as heretical. And some people who do work with her want to keep it on the down low. So keep that in mind. She's a little more open here in the United States, whereas her worship in Mexico is a little less. Oh, thank you, Randy. So again, Santa Muerte is death itself. She's a primal force. She is the primal force of death. And therefore, she is more chaotic in energies to a certain degree from what we view her as. So we'll talk about some of this more in the future. I don't plan this to be like the end-all, be-all for talking about Santa Muerte. But as she is a deity of, again, using the Western terminology, karma, her rules and viewpoint on that is more primal. And less aligned with human concepts of these ideas. So, for example, both the cartels and the police do work with Santa Muerte to keep themselves safe. Anyone who does any sort of nighttime work, anything that would put them in harm's way, a lot of these people will worship Santa Muerte for protection, even if they're on opposite sides of that sort of the battle, I suppose. Even though they both work with her, Santa Muerte loves us all, and she won't judge any of us. She will help anyone who comes to her the best that she can. We dig our own graves the way that we choose to, but she will help us as much as she can while we're alive. And when we're dead, we just return to her embrace. So she will grant our wishes and help us to live our best lives no matter what we have done. She will give us, again, enough rope to either help ourselves out or to hang ourselves. She lets our consequences speak for our actions, but she will love us and help us all equally anyway. So as such, she is often misunderstood by those in Hollywood and popular culture, and even the Catholic Church as a cartel goddess. You'll hear her referred to as that, which is not exactly true. It's not a good representation of her or what she does. So she simply just loves those in the cartel as much as anyone else. She sees them all as valid human beings that deserve a good life, and sees them as her children as well. They have to choose this, but she will help them to live a good life. So it's up to them or to us to decide how we wish to use her help, and we'll either suffer or enjoy the consequences of such. And that's up to us. So some people may wonder why we would want to work with death, and they might find the concept a bit morbid, especially in our modern culture. So why would people want to work with the power of death? What might this bring to your practice in incorporating a little bit of Santa Muerte in what you do? Well, to answer that, death is power and transformation. It is the mouth and the tail of the Ouroboros coming together. It is that point of transmutation, and as this is the point of change, of breakdown and reintegration through regeneration, it is the point of the greatest power. So human beings all know death is a sure thing. We all know this, even if we don't want to acknowledge or tip our hats to that. Many of us have seen and even know death through the events that have unfolded in our lives. Many of us have experienced this intense figurative death, both internally as well as externally in our lives, especially those of us who work with Santa Muerte. And we definitely know the transformational power it holds. So many who have experienced this power in our lives, even though it often is one of the hardest things a person goes through at the beginning, it forever changes you, and then we end up craving this energy in our lives. We understand its power. We understand what it can do for us as human beings to shape us into our best potential. And so a lot of times we end up craving this, and we wish to know its mysteries deeper. So befriending quiet darkness and death gives you power and truth in return. Not just of the universe itself, but also within your own depths, within your own being, within your own subconscious or your own depths of Magickal, as you might say. So you must transform your inner darkness and fears to truly embrace the mysteries and power of death. The mysteries of death in Santa Muerte, as I said previously, are very personal for each person. Death comes for us all, but in the meantime, she wants us to live a good life before she comes to reap us and end that life. Santa Muerte can only embody death. Life is the one thing that she cannot have or experience. Therefore, it's the one thing she truly holds sacred. To honor her, give her anything that is of life. What she craves is the essence of life itself, all of it. The joys, the pains, the laughter, the sorrows, everything that makes you feel alive. She wants us to live a full life. Devoting your life to her, therefore, would be the highest service that one can give. The joy that she feels when we live a full life is her greatest reward. She loves nothing more than enjoying life with you, celebrating and crying with you, working her magic with you, granting you access to her power to help you experience life more fully, sharing herself with you while you in turn share the essence of life with her. This is true devotion to her, and this is what this group is about. A lot of times in my own personal practice, I have done dancing to music that she loves. I'll turn on some music that she loves and I'll dance, and that's a type of sacred devotion that I can give to her. Of course, praying the rosary, of course, all of these things. I will say before I continue, it's very important, because she only is death, to give her energy of life so that she can feed upon it. That is what allows her to give you things in return. So make sure that you put things of life on her altar. That's why we give her tequila, or we give her water. Water is one of the most sacred things that you can offer to her, because water is life itself. So just keep that in mind. Give her things that bring her that joy, that feeling of being alive, whatever brings you that feeling of being alive, or anyone else. And we can talk about that a little more later. I also am not going to go terribly deep into her different colors and different symbols, but she has many. Like I said, she is a full magical system in and of herself. So yeah, moving on. That's what this group is all about. It's all about learning and going deeper with Santa Muerte and the Magickal Rosary. So stay tuned for more videos in the very near future. Keep your eyes on the events tab. I'll be posting them there. And hopefully next time I won't be 10 minutes late because my computer wasn't working properly. Hopefully I can figure that out. It worked fine on my own personal page the other day. It just didn't work in the group page today. So, but yeah, we'll be doing lots of live videos. We're going to be doing, Friday, I believe. Let me just take a look. We're going to have a watch party on Friday where you can watch an interview that I did last summer on Santa Muerte. It was about who she is and how she works. Some of what we discussed today will be in there. It's about an hour long. And we can also discuss that content together in the chat while we watch it together. So the next live video will be on Sunday. I haven't scheduled that yet, but it's going to be Sunday, about the same time probably. And it's going to be of our first rosary practice. So we'll be able to talk about the rosary and do a rosary to Santa Muerte together, which is very nice and meditative. So it's going to be a nice experience. And when we do it together, we get to raise energy. So I'll be discussing the rosary and teach you how to pray one, and then we'll pray it together. So after that, be on the lookout for a 2-part series that was inspired by this pandemic. It's one I did a couple weeks back when we first went under lockdown in my classes that I teach the workshops that I teach every Monday. And it was basically about a discussion of the psychology and physiology of panic, what it does to your magic as well, and how to transmute that power on a rosary so you can move forward in power rather than forward in anxiety. Oh, thank you, Risa. I appreciate that. And then finally, we're also going to have an interview, like I was talking about, from our resident brujo, Roman Delgado. He's going to be talking about the cultural aspects of Santa Muerte and her traditional magic as well, and we'll just let him talk about all sorts. He's wonderful to interview. He did post an interview that you can check out. It was in a post yesterday that was made, so I highly recommend it. All of his interviews are amazing. We'll also have other ways to keep everyone involved and engaged with Santa Muerte on this group and her magical practices, as well as different ways to practice the rosary and other prayer beads. So, and we welcome anyone who would like to post about that. So I'm now going to open this video for about 10 minutes or so to any questions that anyone may have. Feel free to type them into the chat window and I'll see them when they pop up. I think I was doing pretty good job of that. But if I missed anything, I apologize. Trying to go back and forth, had to sort of rig this a little differently than I normally would, since it's not even Mercury retrograde, but it was messing up a little bit on me today. So yes, if you have any questions about any of the content I talked about Santa Muerte and who she is, feel free to post in chat. And then in the group, feel free to post about your altars. your practices with her or with rosaries, how she helps you in your own practice, any prayers or other relevant content about Santa Muerte, or any relevant content about rosaries and prayer beads and what you do with those practices. This group is for all to learn and to share. It's a group for learning. So please keep in mind that only approved reciprocal offers that we pre-screen will ever be shown in this group. It's not a marketing group, it's a learning group. So we're going to share our journeys, not necessarily sharing our marketing. We don't allow advertising here, essentially, unless it's pre-approved. Mercury pandemic grade. I love it. I'll answer that in just a second, Randy. That's a good question. So the mod team here in the group will showcase the relevant material from time to time. But as in the spirit of Santa Muerte, we will offer content for everyone. I know for me, I'm writing a book at this point, and so is the other mod. And we also are bringing our content online, and some of that will absolutely be free. Some of it I'll be like, hey, this is where you find it, and there'll be different levels of support that you can offer if you feel so inclined, at a later date though. That's not coming quite yet. So yeah, Santa Muerte is the saint of the disenfranchised, the poor, the downtrodden. For that reason, we're very careful about the content that we bring to you, and we screen the posts to ensure no one in the group is harmed, or to ensure that like what's being brought to you is valid and good content. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact a mod about that. We do enjoy having all of you in this group, and we look forward to building a strong community of devotees. And also, if you don't have any questions right now, that's okay. You always have the opportunity to ask in the group at whatever point that it pops into your head, or on another live video or watch party if a question comes up later. And just be patient. We only have 2 mods in the group, but feel free to invite anyone that you think would be interested in this group. So Randy asks, how did she manifest to you? So Santa Muerte came at the beginning in spurts and stops to me. My friend Roman, who you'll meet in a little bit when we do our live video together, he is the one who introduced me to her. I think it was way back in like 2013 when we first met. We were working at a spiritual shop together, and he would always talk of Santa Muerte, and he would teach me a little bit about her there. And I know I did a couple things that were smaller to her, with her, like smaller workings, getting my feet wet, that sort of thing. Later on, we became roommates. I believe that was in 2015. And at that point, I started getting pretty involved because she was there all the time. And she just sort of stole my heart. There were several deities that I never thought I would actually choose a deity. I thought I would just work with a bunch of them, more like whatever magical working I wanted to do. I didn't have a patron, and I didn't really care if I did. I don't like choosing favorites usually. But Santa Muerte really stole my heart. She and I've been through a lot in my life, and she and I have very similar energies in certain ways. So she just felt like coming home to me. And so I started working with her more and more, and got my own altar, and ended up dedicating to her, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And even the year leading up to that, like maybe 5 years ago or something, 4 or 5 years ago, I started getting really serious with her. I've taken a course from a curandera since, and she's manifested so many different ways to me. I hear her all the time. She's hilarious, actually. I love working with her because she's a little raunchy sometimes. She has a great sense of humor, and she'll tell me what she wants. Like, she's pretty blunt about things. Like, hey, where's my water? Hey, you haven't given me coffee in a while. Hey, whatever. Like, she's pretty direct with me. She tells me what she wants, and what I'm doing with this community, and what I have done with the classes to her and workshops, and all the content I've written, and all the rosary scripts that I've written, all of that was sacred service to her. So yeah, is she used with comfort and easing passage? Absolutely. If you are a death doula, Santa Muerte is perfect to work with. So yeah, anyone in the healthcare community right now, I know we have people from all over the world. I am live in the US right now. And so anyone working in the US, since pretty much I don't know how many states are under lockdown, but a lot of them are, and mine is too. A lot of places don't have enough gloves. They don't have enough protective gear. And a lot of people who are working in hospitals or other sort of medical working, you're welcome, Randy. A lot of people doing that need to feel protected. And so again, Santa Muerte is perfect for that type of protection. So yeah, absolutely. Anyone doing death doula work, anyone doing shadow work for a living, Santa Muerte is great for all of that. Absolutely. So yeah. So are there any other questions before I call this video good? Seeing if anything pops up. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, she's wonderful. And she helps transition smoothly. Again, she wants us to have a good death. She wants to reap us when it's our time. And to give us a good death. And through a good life comes a good death. There's many elements to that. I understand lots of it. I don't understand all of it, truthfully. Some of these are even greater mysteries that I'll be able to learn as I keep going deeper with her over the years. It's something that constantly keeps expanding. But I know when I'm very connected to my cats. Like, I am a crazy cat lady. Santa Muerte likes cats. It's not like they're not one of her, quote, symbols, but she does like cats a lot. So I don't know. I'm a crazy cat lady and we enjoy the cats. But my one cat who was my first son, he passed away almost 2 years ago. And I knew it was coming because his kidneys were shutting down. So you knew. And that was the first time I really had experienced a literal death up close. And so, I prayed to her to help him in his crossing. And she was absolutely there for him, and she still is. She works with all types of spirits, any deceased spirit, anyone who does graveyard work, anyone who works with spirits, anyone who does any sort of mediumship, likely already works with Santa Muerte and doesn't realize it, or has, well, yeah, pretty much. They're more familiar with her than they might realize, because she does work with all of those things. And part of my course, we go deep into mediumship. So currently the free version is only being offered on Second Life. That's where I have said I would do it for the rest of the year. And once the year is over, the free content will be whatever I choose at that point. The whole course will not be for free. If you're not able to do Second Life, there will be other opportunities, like I said, for different levels of support. There will be some free content as well that I offer, but we're getting ready to go into that mediumship, graveyard workings, that sort of thing, working with the dead, necromancy, and that's one of my favorite topics. I love working with these things. So, well, blessings to you all. May Santa Muerte bless you and guide you. And stay tuned. Look out for events, because I'll be posting events in the Facebook group, so we can do more live videos, more chatting, watch parties, and things like that. And we'll be bringing you more content. Blessings to all. Have a wonderful evening. Prepara